Andrew, thank you so much for joining me in the LSI studio today.
Thanks very much, Nick.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you're doing at FeelTect?
So FeelTect are developing connected health technology for wound care. So we're developing a wearable device to measure the pressure during compression therapy. We're looking at trying to then have that remotely transferred, and that's going to allow us to sort of monitor the treatment that venous leg ulcer patients are getting.
So how are patients with venous leg ulcerations being monitored today? Is it all visually?
Yeah, that's it. It's intuition, I think. So there's a lack of evidence that's being applied.
And what is your technology providing that's not currently being given to the providers that are managing these patients?
Venous leg ulcers, the first point of treatment for them is always compression therapy. It helps to overcome the underlying venous insufficiency. It restores the blood flow, and then that ultimately heals the wound. The problem is that if you apply compression too tight, it's dangerous, and too loose, it's ineffective. So what we're trying to do is allow for the correct amount of pressure to be applied during the application.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about what the technology actually is and how does it work when used in combination with compression therapy?
So it's a wearable device. It has a sensing arm. It has 3 pressure sensing regions, and that goes beneath the bandage. Then on the outside, we have an electronics clip. So the electronics clip is transmitting signals wirelessly to a mobile app, and then that transmits to a cloud, and you can remotely monitor on a web-based dashboard.
What's the dashboard look like for a provider? What sort of additional information are you providing them?
So at the moment, it's telling you what the pressure is. And I think that the thing is, we are not informing people like this is what pressure you should apply. That's up to the healthcare professional in conjunction with their negotiation with the patient, for example. So what we're allowing for is tailored treatment to each individual patient. And then over time, we'll generate enough data in the platform that we can then start to sort of say, well, this is what pressure works, this is what doesn't work. And then we can actually implement more alerts to help guide that compression.
How long does compression therapy typically take to be managed properly?
Well, at the moment, the average healing time is 17 weeks. But with effective treatment, it's been shown that the average healing time can drop down to 12 weeks. So at the moment, what we're looking to do is have a 30% reduction in healing time. The other big issue is that these patients are being treated twice a week, with obligatory visits. If we had something that was able to tell, which patients need to be treated and when, that's going to be a big impact on reducing those patient visits.
So your technology is really optimizing the current standard of care for these patients.
That's it. And it's also changing the scope of who can actually apply that compression. I think that at the moment, a lot of times the nurses may not have been trained in compression therapy to begin with, but this is something that helps to upskill those nurses, but also empowers the patients to actually take that on board themselves. And the benefit there is that, if you do have a swelling reduction and you do have a loss of pressure, therefore a loss of efficacy, having the patients, their carers, take that compression on board themselves and reapply it, you have a much faster healing time.
You're really empowering both stakeholders in this scenario here with your technology, which is great. I am just curious, what happens when venous leg ulcerations are not managed properly?
Improper application of treatment for these patients results in a 20-fold increase in hospitalization, for much more serious conditions like sepsis, for example. So not only is it sort of a risk to delayed healing, but it's a risk to being exacerbated and then turning into something much more serious that costs a lot more money and a lot more threat to the patient.
What stage are you guys at as a company? Are you already commercial? Could you give me a sense for when this technology or where this technology is available?
Yeah, so we raised our seed round in 2021, and that allowed us to go through design for manufacturing, verification, validation, testing. We have registered with the FDA as a Class 1 510K exempt product. We've submitted our CE mark, and what we're looking at now is conducting our first patient study in the Veterans Health Administration in Florida. So that's a 30-patient study that's about to start recruitment this month. We're not commercial yet, but we're very close to. So We're expecting by Q3 2023, we'll actually be, starting with our beachhead customers to commercialize the technology.
How many patients are currently dealing with this problem? Give us a sense of the magnitude.
So globally, about 11.5 million. In the USA, it's about 1 million. So Europe, 2.9 mil. It's a big problem. And I think that, it's one of these things that will only get worse with an aging population, with, obesity, for example, is another comorbidity. It's growing. And, for example, the last 5 years, the number of venous leg ulcers in the UK actually doubled. The problem is that the healing rate for those patients actually decreased by 20%. And I think a lot of that is to do with there's more patients but less nurses to actually, treat them.
Yeah, you're not able to properly manage them, and as a result, people are going to the wayside and not getting their treatment that they need. With improper compression therapy, is there a chance that the ulceration recurs?
Yeah, it's like the recurrence rate is massive. 70% of patients will come back in within 3 months. And I think that compression is very effective for managing the open wound, but there is a need then for wearing maintenance stockings, for example, to continue helping that underlying problem of venous insufficiency even after the wound is closed. And sometimes these patients will then go on to get interventional treatments, so for example, venous ablation procedures. But compression is always the first line treatment for these particular patients.
Is there then a potential application of your technology in these compression socks or other devices that other products that patients are using to manage their?
Well, the big problem with recurrence is that it's a non-compliance issue, and it's not that we want to sort of be big brother to these patients, but it is worth understanding if a patient is complying with their maintenance therapy, and if not, then actually talk to them, understand why. So this is something that could be used to, identify those issues with compliance and then negotiate a concordance with that patient.
What brings you to LSI this year?
So we're looking for investment at the moment. We have a 2.5 million pre-Series A round open. We have about 1.5 million committed, but what we're really looking for is, a US investor to come on board, and help us guide into the US market. It's a big opportunity for us, and we see it as our first focus. But having that value-added investment will only help us to sort of be successful.
Are there other companies doing similar remote monitoring of compression therapy, or are you guys a pioneer, would you say, in this market?
Yeah, there's other technologies that I guess measure compression. They're kind of mostly used in clinical trials or sometimes training scenarios, but there is no technology that's currently monitoring compression therapy effectively, and none that's being used routinely in clinical practice. I think our biggest competitor is the do nothing, and what we're trying to do is sort of overcome that by showing people, well, this actually can have a big impact on improving the standard of care, and there is evidence behind what we're doing. We're not changing a mechanism of action here. We're just helping the implementation of something that's already known.
Yeah, that clinical evidence is critical these days, I believe, in making sure that the right stakeholders react positively to your product when it's introduced to them.
Yeah, no, it's very important for us. As a Class 1 technology, the regulatory barriers for us are quite low, but it doesn't negate the need to do, rigorous clinical validation for the adoption of the technology. Reimbursement, all those kind of things that are still very important for us to show that this can have a significant impact, not just to the patients themselves, but to the healthcare systems and the reduction in cost of these wounds, because that is the big problem with them. That, they might not be the thing that kills a patient, but often they're the thing that a patient will die with. And at the moment, the amount of money that's being spent on them is phenomenal. In the UK, the cost of treating venous leg ulcers alone equates to as much as 40% of all cancers combined. So, there's a huge burden on the healthcare system too.
Andrew, I want to thank you for stopping by the studio today. It's been a pleasure to learn about what you're doing at FeelTect.
Thanks so much, Nick. Yeah, really appreciate it.